con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, Permasalud Glamping, Marathon Sports.
Hello everyone and welcome to New Age. Today I'm going to share an interview with Philip Aaberg, a great musician, a great pianist, and we are going to have the first part today. And we are going to cover his music for the 20th century. Before I start with the interview, I want to give you some idea of who he is. He was born April 1949 in Montana, United States. And he's an American pianist and composer. And by the age of 14, he was performing with local bands at dances. He won a Leonard Bernstein Scholarship to study music at Harvard. After receiving his Bachelor of Arts degree, he moved to Oakland, California, and played in blues clubs for several years. He also toured and recorded as a member of the Elvin Bishop's group at the time of its greatest popularity and co-wrote the title song of the band's 1976 Strutting, an album which also included Bishop's biggest hit, Fooled Around and Fell in Love, featuring Philip on the piano. He gained international recognition through a series of successful piano recordings releases on Windham Hill Records. Although classically trained, Philip incorporates classical, jazz, bluegrass, rock, and new music elements into his compositions and music structures. Although best known for his solo piano work, he is most at home in the chamber jazz genre. His compositions are noted for their rigorous keyboard technique, diverse influences, and colorful compositional style. Philip Aaberg has performed with the Boston Pops Orchestra and has appeared in the Marlboro Chamber Music Festival. As a guest artist, he has performed on over 200 albums and on the PBS All-American Jazz program, which earned him an Emmy Award nomination. He has appeared with Peter Gabriel and Tom Johnston of the Doobie Brothers in concert. In 2000, he began his record label. Actually, I know it was in 1974, but maybe again in year 2000. But this time with his wife Patty, Sweetgrass Music, through which he has since endeavored to produce music that connects a global audience to the sweeping landscape of the West. Releases include Field Notes, Live from Montana, which received a Grammy nomination, Christmas, Blue West, and High Plains Christmas from 2013. Throughout his career, Philip has produced music and consistently translated Montana's farms, ranches, and native cultures into musical concepts and has forged a unique keyboard style that paints an audible portrait of his home state. Philip also produces a public radio program called or named Of the West, Creativity and Sense of Place. He received the Montana Governance Award for the Arts and in 2011 received the Montana Arts Council Innovator Award. He scored for Class C, the only game in town, which was nominated for a regional Emmy. Philip and his wife Patty run Sweetgrass Music, the Great Northern Bed and Breakfast, and Westland Suite, and The Bean Recording Studio. We will go now to a little break and we will come back with Philip for an amazing interview and we will share, obviously, his music. You will find just the interview in our YouTube channel and the full program in our Vimeo channel that I will let the links in the description at the YouTube channel. And we will also have the podcast of the show for Spotify and iVoox. as well as you can follow us in our webpage, radioserenidad.com, that I will also put here under the description in the YouTube, where we have links to other interviews in English and also in Spanish, and more about our show. I hope you really enjoy this interview, and Philip, and be attentive for the second part. We'll be back shortly.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Estás escuchando New Age, el programa de la nueva era.
So, as I mentioned, now we are here live with Philip Aaberg. Is it Aaberg or Aaberg?
It's sort of in between.
Somewhere between.
The Norwegian way is different from either one.
Oh.
You're really close with either one.
Oh, good. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And so, Philip, I would love to just go through your journey, your musical journey, starting back when you got involved with the piano. I mean, you grew up in a little town in Montana, in Chester, yes. I guess, Chester.
Yes.
And gosh, that was so small. And how did you get involved with piano? Because I think you had to go to Spokane to get piano lessons. I mean, that's far.
It's far.
How was that?
I just found a little treasure, and it was a recording that my mother had made when she was about 21. And it was on a 78 record. And I finally have a turntable that will play a 78, that speed. And she was a pianist, and I never really knew how she played because she raised my brother and me as a single mother. And so she didn't have time to practice. But I heard these records, and I realized that she was really good, It was a place where you could go in, and they had a nice piano, and they would make a record, and you would pay them for it. And she had a couple of those that she had kept all these years. And when she passed away, I found them and just played them this year. And it was a window to the past, both to hear my mother play the piano and to hear her voice as a young woman, 21. It was really interesting. But we had a piano. We always had a piano. You have to have a piano if you're going to be a piano player. And that's what I tell everybody. Do you have a piano? They say, oh, I wish my child would play music. I say, do you have a piano? Get a piano. But you have to have that first. So we always had piano, and I think I discovered that was my instrument really early. There wasn't another instrument that I liked nearly as much. Strings and wind instruments and percussion. I mean, I played drums and I played brass instruments, but the piano always spoke to me because I think it's like an orchestra, and you can play everything on it. It's the range of the orchestra, really, almost. And the piano doesn't, it's a percussion instrument. So you play one note, that's it. So everything that you do is smoke and mirrors. If you're making a legato singing line, you have to figure out how to do that on the piano. The percussion stuff is easy. The rest of it is hard. But I just loved it. I asked for lessons when I was 4, and they wouldn't give them to me because the teachers said I had to read the alphabet first. So I think I was 6 when I started taking piano lessons. I loved it, and it was difficult because the teacher that I had moved away from the little town, and then I had to go to another town, and then she quit teaching lessons, and then I went to another town, and finally, when I was going to the southern part of the state in Bozeman, Montana during the summers to visit my aunt and uncle, I would take some lessons at Montana State University from 2 professors there, Charles Payne and Henry Campbell. And Henry Campbell, at one point when I was in high school, I was good. I loved it so much I practiced, and I just had a natural facility for it, and so I was noticed. And I think at that point I was kind of the big fish in a small pond in Montana. And Henry Campbell, who was at Montana State University, said, if you want to get any better, you're going to have to find a better teacher. So we, and I say we, my mother and I decided that I could go to Spokane to study with Margaret Saunders Ott, who was just a brilliant, brilliant teacher. And So I would take the train there every other week and stay 2 days with them, with the Ott family. I stayed in their house and studied with her. And she really opened my life to what it was like to be a professional musician, and opened a lot of windows and doors to other places in life for me too.
Wow. And I imagine you had a lot of classical training. How important was that classical training in developing your career?
Yeah, I'm kind of strange that way in that I don't really have classifications. I mean, I just played a concert with the music that I composed for chamber groups, and I improvised with a friend of mine. And I'm preparing a concert now. I've got these up here. They were just here. A Beethoven sonata, some Schumann pieces, and some Manuel de Falla pieces. I'm going to do those as a concert. Everything has just kind of been parallel roads for me. There have been. I've never really felt like I was in a bin in a record store in a classification. I know people have to do that to know where you are and sell. Yeah. But honestly, there's no difference in any kind of music to me. So the classical music was really, really important for me. Number one, because I love it. Number two, because I think it, until blues and jazz came along to our world, in the early 1900s, a little bit earlier even, classical music was the well. It was the source for all this music. And classical musicians, back in the day, they took all kinds of music. Beethoven took folk songs, Schumann took folk songs, Brahms took folk songs, Bartok took folk songs, and Chopin took the dance music of his time. So, it's hard to say that, Beethoven didn't call himself a classical musician. Neither did Mozart. Neither did Schumann. Stravinsky didn't say I'm a contemporary musician. He's just a musician and a composer. Duke Ellington, one of the greatest musicians in history, said there are only two kinds of music, good and bad. And there's good and bad in every kind of music that you're going to hear. And sometimes the bad comes through and is more popular for different reasons, and usually effort and economics and the marketplace, and sometimes that music just dies. And then something, Bach, nobody knew Bach's music for a long time after he died.
Yeah.
Beethoven was extremely popular. Brahms was extremely popular.
Mozart as well.
Mozart too. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree with you that when you're a composer, what you do is compose and play music, and it doesn't matter the label. The label are for the rest of us who need to find a place to get your music or, to see it.
Yeah.
So in a way, labels are necessary, and for the composers, who cares? But
Right.
I never actually knew anything about Montana until knowing that I was going to interview you, and I was researching about Montana on the internet, and I was really surprised through pictures and videos, and the mountains and the rivers and the small towns and everything.
Yeah.
So after all those years that you went to California and you stayed in Oakland, and probably you traveled all over because you played with certain musicians that we'll talk about, why did you go back to Montana? And what can you share with us about the place where you live?
Yeah. Well, people tell me it's a lot like Argentina in many ways, in that you have the plains and then you have the mountains rising up. There's a big mountain range that goes the whole length of it. It's the same way in the United States, kind of splits us north and south. And then there's another one on the East Coast that does the same thing. So for me, I went away to school. I went to Harvard, which is really culturally very far from where and how I grew up. And it was so different that I think I started re-examining my upbringing and my life in Montana. because the things that comforted me when I was on the East Coast, going to Harvard with a totally different, really a cultural structure and different landscape, different density of population, different animals, different plants. I started really examining that, and it was at this time that I really started playing a lot. I always improvised. I improvised by the time I was 6, but I didn't really do it consciously. It just played. So I started doing it more consciously in college, and I started thinking about what it was that made me who I am. And I think that's really what an improvising musician is trying to do. You're trying to discover yourself in that music, and in a kind of a purity of expression that can come out if you take all the things that have influenced you and then bring them out in whatever way you can, through your hands and through your heart and through your brains. And so I started thinking about what it was about Montana. I mean, I really missed Montana. And then I started analyzing. I missed the sound, or really the lack of sound, the quiet that was there. I missed the way the sky is. It's a very different sky from the East Coast, which is close to the ocean with a lot more rain. It's a very open blue sky. And they call Montana big sky country, and you really realize it if you've gone somewhere else, and then you come, especially to the area where I grew up on the plains. On the high plains, they're kind of going up to the mountains, and the sky is a different nature. I always told people that when you come to Montana, you don't look around, you look out. And it's that sort of 1,000-mile stare, I think, that really, there's a place where I grew up in the Sweetgrass Hills. There's a mountain that's sacred to the Blackfeet Indians. And I've climbed that mountain a number of times. And when you get up to the top of that, you can look in 4 directions. You can see the Rocky Mountains to the west. You can see the Cypress Hills to the north. You can see the Bear's Paw Hills to the east. You can see the Highwood Mountains to the south. And you can see literally hundreds of miles. And when I got to the East Coast, I was so excited to get out of Cambridge, Boston area, and go up to Vermont and to the country, because that was what the country was there. So we got there, and I climbed up to a mountain, and I looked around, and I didn't see anything but more trees and more mountains. I thought, I'll be able to see the ocean. No, well, there's just more trees, more mountains. It's a different thing. And the structure of the landscape, I think, really influenced the music that I started concentrating on when I was writing. And I think that showed up even in the way I played rock and roll and pop music. There's more space. There are certain figures that different pianists have developed, like Floyd Kramer. And also bluegrass music had a lot of that country feel to it. Some of that came from the South, some of that came from the West, some of that came from folk music of Europe, especially the British Isles. So I started taking all that stuff in, and plus the fact that I did like music by living composers, and I played that a lot and studied that a lot. So there were a lot of different ways of composing, different from typical song form that would be Brahms or Schubert or any of these people. Vastly different. Although, really, if you dig into a lot of that music, there are a lot of the same things that are used now that were used back then. Only 2 kinds of music, good and bad. Yeah. But the landscape, I think, once I started to examine who I was and where I came from and why I felt the way I did, really made a big impression on me in terms of how I composed after that.
So exactly, I was going to ask you exactly something that goes along the way, and in what way nature, and since you were surrounded by so much, in what way nature really stimulated your creativity in music.
Yeah. And I think that was a really important thing about being on Windham Hill as well. Because at that time, there wasn't, nobody talked about New Age and nobody talked about what it is. But there were some things that were really common to a lot of the artists on Windham Hill. And that was definitely one of them, especially Will Ackerman, who's still a dear friend of mine. Nature, the sense of nature is really big with him. And it's really big with a lot of the artists that are on Windham Hill too. Liz Story has a song called Church of Trees. And her sense, I mean, she grew up in Los Angeles, but now she lives in Prescott, Arizona, out in the, it's pretty wild out there. Will lives up in the woods. A lot of people live in these places that are really important to us, but we all came into the city to do the music. But I think coming to Windham Hill felt like, in a way, coming home, which was really good for me. My first record there was High Plains, and that was really, I was thinking about my childhood and in the plains a lot, and my childhood in Montana, and that's what came out. Yeah.
But how did you get into Windham Hill? What took you there?
You got time for a long story? I don't know.
I'd love to hear it, I'm sure.
It's okay. So yeah, I was doing a lot of studio session work, in Los Angeles and New York and San Francisco, playing on people's records, and even doing some commercials, which I did for a little bit until it made me sick, and just because it's not music, and doing some soundtracks and things like that. And I was working on a record by a musician named Roger Voudouris, who has passed away. And Roger had a hit called Get Used to It, and this was, I think, his second record. And I don't really know who got me on that record, but it was with a lot of really great studio musicians from LA. Jeff Porcaro was playing drums, a bunch of other people, great guitar players, and I was there to do the keyboards. And that was a real turning point for a lot of reasons, in that, number one, the musicians kept coming up to me, because I would play little things during the tunes, and they were really supportive and encouraging about that kind of music. And then Roger, I got along with great. He was a very funny man, and with a lot of great energy. And I came home from that session, and I did a commercial for Mobil Oil. And I came home and I felt so bad. I felt physically ill. My whole body just was like, because the money is so good doing that a lot of musicians would say, what a great opportunity, and why would you ever turn that down? And I just knew that I couldn't do that stuff anymore. I mean, my shoulders hurt, my head hurt, my stomach hurt, everything hurt, because I was making a lot of money for 45 minutes of selling something that I knew was not doing a good thing for the earth. And right when I came back from that, I sat down in my piano room and I wrote down what I wanted to do. And I looked at it and I said, oh, that's funny. Nobody will ever pay me to do that. And it was what I'm doing now and had been doing since that time, which was everything, classical music, chamber music, my music, rock and roll, everything. Blues, but I did it, and it was a start. And I said, okay, I'm going to give myself a year from this date to just work on my music. And if nothing happens, then I'll become a gardener or a postman, and then I can do whatever I want with my music. I didn't have that kind of drive to be famous and rich and famous. I guess that's what it is. Really, never had that. And so I gave myself a year from that date. And the next day, Roger Voudouris called me, the guy I'd done the record with. And he said, so I've decided to stop being a rock and roll musician, and I'm going to be a manager, and I want to manage you. I said, what? He said, yeah, I think I'd be really good at it. I said, well, what are you going to manage? He said, well, I called Windham Hill today, Windham Hill Records. Have you heard of them? And I said, yeah, I heard of them. I don't have any of the records. You know, I think I was in a restaurant and I heard a record by Michael Hedges and one by Barbara Higbee and Daryl Anger. I said, that's really beautiful stuff. And he said, well, they want to hear a demo from you. And I said, yeah. He said, yeah. But they want it, this was like Tuesday. They want it Friday. I said, okay, I don't have a demo. He said, well, you better get one because I have a meeting with them on Friday. So the next day, I went into a college where a friend of mine had the little recording studio, and he had a big, beautiful grand piano there. And I just sat down and improvised for about an hour and a half. And from that collection of improvisations, I called things that could be called pieces, you know, and some of them actually wound up on the first record. And those were the days of cassettes. You'd make a copy of your music on a cassette to send it to other people. So immediately made a copy. Roger was there and he helped me go through these pieces and figure something out. And we did it, made a cassette. And he was in Sacramento. So this was Monday that I did the thing. And then I sent the tape to him on Wednesday and he got it on Thursday. And he said, oh, this is really nice. Well, what do you call it? And I said, don't have any names for them yet because that's something that I take time with. I want to know. Some of them I know what they're about, and I knew what they're about when I made them. But some of them, he said, "Well, what do we call the whole record?" And I said, he said, "You have to have a name." I said, "Okay." And he said, "Why don't you call it Hidden Harbors?" And I said, "That's a stupid name. Why don't you call yours Hidden Harbors?" And he was very offended. He said, "All right. So what do you want to call it?" And I said, "Well, I'm reading this book." By a writer named David James Duncan. It's my favorite book right now. It's called The River Why, W-H-Y, The River Why. And it's ostensibly about trout fishing, fly fishing. But it's about a lot more than that. So I love the title because it implies a couple of different things. You know, it's pretty ambiguous. And he said, "Well, let's use that." I said, "You can't steal somebody's book title." He said, "Well, we'll put it on there and you can change it later." And I said, "Okay." So he went into Windham Hill and he had like an hour-long meeting with Don Atkinson, who was director of artists and repertoire at that point. And he just talked. Roger was a very good-looking, charming man, and they talked for a long time. And I can imagine he charmed her. And finally, she said, "Well, I have another meeting now. Where's the tape?" And Roger handed it to her, and she looked at it and she said, "What?" Roger says, "Yeah, Phil calls this the River Why." And Don said, "Come here." And she took him next door. Will Ackerman was in Vermont. This was in Sausalito, California. Will Ackerman was in Vermont building a barn or something. And she took him next door to Will's office, and there was a stack of 40 copies of The River Why on his desk. She said, "That's Will Ackerman's favorite book."
Oh my God.
So she took the tape, and Roger left. He called back to me. He said, "Well, I think it was a good meeting." And Don said, "We'll have to send this to Will." So she sent it to Will, like next day mail or something, and he got it. And he immediately called her and he said, "Is this a joke? Is this a joke?" She said, "No, you better listen to this one." So he did, and it was a series of things where they put me on a sampler and had me come into to a studio to pretend I was making a record for some interview and TV thing. And finally, they signed me. It was too easy. They signed me to a record deal. It was a very good record deal too. Yeah.
So that's when you launched High Plains in 1985, and I think Maria's River Breakdown was in the sampler, in the Windham Hill sampler.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
amazing song. So,
thank you.
What do you recall about this album? I mean, it's your first album on Windham Hill. It's probably the one that pushed you to be renowned or push you to create your own music. What do you remember about High Plains as the album? Because we're going to we're gonna listen to 5 songs from this album, and I'm gonna see if you remember any song stories from the some songs.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I just want to say right again, I really appreciate you doing this. It's really nice to have somebody go into depth into a story. I think the first thing I remember about the recording is how difficult it was to believe that my own music would be appreciated by someone else. And that's where Will Ackerman came into the picture. Because Ackerman is if he likes something, he's so enthusiastic about it. He could sell horrible dog food to somebody. He's like Tom Sawyer in the Mark Twain book, who can get anybody to do anything. But he's so enthusiastic about stuff, and he loved that music, and that was a real encouragement for me. So it made it a lot easier to go in and record things. And really the stuff that I was doing was kind of in a vacuum. I mean, nobody had heard this music. I had not played. I improvised sometimes for people, but these were real pieces. And I thought, this is not the usual fare. I wasn't copying anything. I didn't know what the Windham Hill sound was, for crying out loud. It was just music for me. And so I think that was the first hurdle to overcome, was to believe that someone would actually want it. And then finally, once I got to that point, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what the reception was. It was like, okay, this music makes me feel a certain way. If it makes me cry, that's good. If it makes me happy, that's good. Maybe somebody else will feel the same way. So I put that out, and I got over that hurdle, and it was easy then to record the music with determination and to do it the best way I could. So I think the kind of one of the things that I remember was that getting the sound of the piano took a long time for me, because I wanted to hear what the piano sounded like. I wanted the listener to hear what the piano sounded like from my perspective, right here. And that meant microphones are really interesting. They don't hear the same way we do. And so I remember that we messed around. I think we took a whole day to get that final sound for the piano, and then we didn't change it. And we used very little reverb or processing or anything like that on the record. We wanted it to be really natural. The recording, it was recorded in Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, which was Saul Zaentz was a guy who made his money through movies, but also through Creedence Clearwater Revival. And Creedence Clearwater Revival had a room in Fantasy Studios, a big room in the corner, because they didn't get along with Saul Zaentz. So they didn't want to have to walk through the front door to potentially see him. So they had a back door. And I had recorded in that room a lot, having done, a ton of recording sessions in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had recorded in Fantasy Studios a lot, and in that particular room. And so it was kind of like my own world. I could come in the back door, there was a little room, and there was a little kitchen in there, and then you go in, and there was a huge room where the piano was, probably twice as big as my studio, which is not a bad size, but big room. And then I went, the pianos that they had, I didn't think would do for the recording, so I went down to the local piano dealer, Piedmont Pianos, and they had, at that point, they were dealing with Hamburg Steinways, and they had a number of those pianos on the floor, and one of them was a Hamburg C, and the C is not sold in the United States, or not made in the United States. It's made in Hamburg. The United States jumps from the 7-foot piano to the 9-foot piano, from a B to a D, and this was a C. And I just loved that piano, and so we used a C on, I think, the first 2 or 3 records that I made.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. It was such a great album. I mean, it was.
Thanks.
It has. I mean, your music, Phil. I mean, I told you when I wrote you, when I was listening to the song from The Shape of the Land, that I was, every time I listen, something happens. but it's
Oh,
like
thank
very
you.
beautiful music. So you have
Thank
to
you.
make sure that I need to let you know that I am not
I
the only
appreciate
one, that your music has you've touched so much, so many people. I mean, for sure. So
Thank you.
it's great that it's good to that you know, and I'm sure that
Thank
you
you.
received some feedback from other people. But it's amazing. So, like from this album, I don't know if you have any song stories about Maria's River Breakdown, Montana Half Light, Westbound, High Plains, and The Big Open. Any of those? We're going to play these 5 songs in the show.
Oh yeah. No, I have
Podcast.
stories.
Okay,
I have stories for everything.
Oh, really?
So okay, so some of the stories are made up after the, I mean, some of the stories were really me remembering what I was thinking about when I was writing the piece, and they helped me then perform the piece. Some of them are made up because people like stories, and they're not necessarily what the piece is about, So Mariah's River Breakdown, definitely. Well, I had been playing with Paul Drescher Ensemble, and Paul is a really great contemporary composer who's influenced by African music and Indian music and rock and roll, and there was kind of a style of recording that people have called different things. They've called it minimalism, they've called it phase music, in which you set up these patterns that are like waves, and they
like Philip Glass kind of thing. Or,
Philip Glass was and Terry Riley, Steve Reich, yes, exactly. So I was very familiar with that music. So I did use some of those ideas in High Plains, in the album, composing the pieces. And Mariah's River Breakdown was one. One of the things that I got from rock and roll that I always loved is if I didn't know a piece and I was hearing it on the radio for the first time, there would be a beat. And you hear this beat, and you wouldn't know whether that was on the 2 and the 4 or the 1 and 3. And when that finally came in, it was like reality flipped a switch, and you were in a different place. So that was one of the things that I tried doing, like. So that switches around a couple of different times so that the beat is in different places. Mariah's River Breakdown, I wanted to try and get what it was that. So I think some of the thing that's different about the music that I do and music that maybe tried to copy the surface of that later on, when Windham Hill became popular and people wanted to make money. They could name a piece after anything. It didn't have to have anything to do with that place. So the things that I wrote really had something to do with what I was thinking about and what I was trying to do. And this was the idea of flow of a current, and sometimes another stream comes in, sometimes those waves impact each other, sometimes it slows down to ripples. So that was the idea of that, and then sometimes they join together and they go down an incline and form a waterfall. And so those were all ideas that I was trying to do with Mariah's River Breakdown. Now, you say it right, it's really Maria's River Breakdown, because Lewis and Clark named this river after, I think, Lewis's cousin, Maria. But Montana's a funny place in that they don't, it's like there's a town called Freud, and it's F-R-O-I-D. It's a French word for cold, froid. Froid. But people from Montana are stubborn, I guess, or whatever they were. So it's Freud. We're going to call it Freud. And so Mariah's, it was Maria's River. And somebody left the apostrophe out, so now they call it the Mariah's River. So it's kind of goofy that way. But this was Mariah's River Breakdown. So one of the things that inspired me to write that was I just read a story. Mariah's River is my hometown river. It's the river I fished in and swam in and floated in since I was a little kid, still do. And I had just read a news article, in the western United States, water rights are a really big deal, and they're going to continue to be a big deal. And there was a plan afoot to pipe the water from the Marias River to Minneapolis, Minnesota, the big city, the closest big city. And that's where the breakdown part came from. It broke me down. I just couldn't conceive of that happening to the river that I felt was sacred. The other reason it's called Breakdown was that I listened to and played with a lot of bluegrass players, and banjo was one of my favorite bluegrass instruments for sure. So I imitated a lot of banjo and I imitated a lot of guitar in my music. So there was a little section in Marias River Breakdown that was kind of like, so that's kind of like a, kind of a banjo kind of finger picking kind of thing. And so that was also another reason to call it Breakdown, Marias River Breakdown. There are bluegrass songs that are called breakdowns. Then there's also a blues kind of, there's a lot of lyrics that say to break down is important. They don't say break down, but they'll say, let's break down, or don't break down. And that means sometimes psychologically breaking down to the lowest thing that you can reach is a good thing. Sometimes breaking down means with whoever you're trying to have a relationship with, you got to break things down to some kind. So all these things came into play in that piece.
I mean, that's an amazing song. But in this album, you have other songs that are great as well, like High Plains and Westbound, and they were great songs. Really, I mean, it's like you talk a lot about blues, but when I heard those songs, and maybe it was in the the boom of the New Age music and the style that was being brought to us, it was so fitted for the Windham Hill style music. It was amazing. It was simply amazing because your piano had an amazing sound, and that's what made this project so amazing. So let's go. Why don't we go and right now we're going to listen to those songs, and we'll be back shortly for the second part, the next project, which is The Shape of the Land. How about that?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Permasalud Glamping Lodge te espera en la provincia de Imbabura, en Ecuador, para que te conectes con la naturaleza, recuperes energía y bienestar. Te ofrecemos domos full equipados y carpas de glamping con toda comodidad. Escoge entre paquetes básicos de estadía y paquetes completos que incluyen desayuno y acceso al área de nuestra piscina natural con baño turco e hidromasaje. ¿Necesitas un espacio de paz y tranquilidad? Entonces, este es el lugar preciso. Visita nuestra web permasalud.com o envíanos un mensaje de WhatsApp al 0999-203-203.
Permítenos acompañarte con New Age.
So Phil, the next project you participated in was The Shape of the Land, in which the album is based in the story of Naomi Uemura, who was lost in Mount McKinley, and it was a very touching story. So, what do you recall about this project? Because I just wonder if you had to know the story of Naomi Uemura in order to create and compose the music for this project.
Yeah, that's the usual way. I mean, sometimes people will just take your music and put it in without you knowing. But if you're actually writing to the film, then yeah, I watched the movie a lot. That movie is now, I think it's hard to find that movie, is now called Lost in the Wilderness. They changed the name of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the actor who played Naomi Uemura just recently passed.
He did. Uh-huh. And he was. I thought he was great in the movie. He was a comedic television actor, and so he played it. It was interesting for me to see the movie because I met with the director, who directed a really popular movie in the United States called The Go Master. Go is a Japanese game. And so I expected something like that, but this was kind of funny, but also really tragic. And so it was kind of, and the thing that was also different about it was the cuts, where they cut from one scene to another, were much faster than the movies that I somehow expected out of Japan, because he asked me, what are your favorite Japanese movies? And it was with a group of like the director and the producer and some other people. I said, I love Kurosawa, Lan and all those great movies. And they looked at each other kind of like, yeah, Americans like those movies, Japanese don't like them that much. So the first thing he said to me was, well, what we want is, we don't want you to do a Japanese score. We want you to do a Windham Hill score, which was funny because I didn't know what Windham Hill was really, but I listened I watched the movie a lot, and there was no music. Sometimes people will put temporary music, or they call it temp music, in the film, so that they can cut to it. And then they want you to sound like that temp music without actually using. And a lot of my music's been used for that, which kind of ticks me off, because why didn't they just ask me to write some music? So there was no music to this one, and I just wrote a theme. So I had, well, one of the things I should say is I had a budget for the movie that I thought was going to enable me to do some orchestral pieces. And when I got to the point where I was ready to add the orchestra, the producer said, "Oh, well, I promised Windham Hill half of that money if we did the album, if we did the deal." I said, "So no orchestra?" They said, "Oh, we don't have any money for that." So I used synthesizer, and I used Eugene Friesen playing some cello, and I emulated a little bit of orchestra stuff, and I had Don Atkinson, who was my producer for High Plains, play clarinet a little bit, and I had Malcolm Dalglish, a good friend of mine, play hammered dulcimer, which worked great, I think, for the scenes. But when I started writing the music, I wanted to come up with the first theme, and I just took the name, Naomi Uemura, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and here was the theme, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 notes that went with his name. And I used that, throughout the movie in different ways. That was supposed to have been big orchestra, but it worked okay. I was very disappointed, though, not to get to use a whole orchestra in the movie.
But Michael Hedges was in one of the songs as well, playing.
Michael, and that's really the first time that I got to spend any time with Michael. We did some touring together afterwards, and he actually played on Out of the Frame. He played on a song on Out of the Frame, and then we would do the Because It's There, the piece that he wrote. He wrote his pieces like I did to the film. So he would watch the film, and they would say, "Well, we want this to be a Michael Hedges piece in here." When I took the commission, they said, "Well, we want Michael Hedges to have a piece, and we want Will Ackerman to have a piece." It's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what can you tell us about the songs? Okay, you just mentioned something about the Naomi Uemura theme song, which is the one you just played.
Yeah.
But I mean, Downhill and When It Snows. I mean, When It Snows is like, oh my God, those 2 songs are just mind blowing.
Oh, thank you.
Really?
So yeah, When It Snows, that's another Montana experience. So there's a thing called whiteout, and that means and that happened, to Naomi when he was climbing Mount Everest. The snow starts blowing in, you have a blizzard, and it's blowing from different directions, and you don't know, sometimes you really don't know whether you're standing up or falling down or which direction you're going. So This is where I use the little, one thing about this simple little thing is that you can count it in 2, or you can count it in 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Or you can count it in 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so that gives you a place to go. You can go off in different directions. But I thought the other idea. So one thing about phase music is that you'll take. One of the techniques is you take a simple riff. We can call it a riff or a phrase, simple phrase, and then you offset. You do the same phrase again and repeat that. You offset a little bit so that you've got things going like this and meeting up in different places. So. It's the same phrase, but you just put it in a different place so that you're not really sure where the 1 is, where it starts, whether it's in 3 or whether it's in 2. And that gives that sense of, well, it could be a sense of freedom or it could be a sense of being lost. And in this case, it was a little of both, because I think, yeah, it depends. Well, and for him as an explorer, I just finished reading a whole bunch of books on the Antarctic explorations, and it's horrifying what they went through, but at the same time, I can see the appeal, the excitement of doing something new. And of course, the deal with Naomi was that he was a hero in Japan, but he was a different kind of hero because Japanese society at that point was all about the group and people working together. And he did all his explorations by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's true. Many experiences he did by himself. So this was really truly adventurous, courageous, and very dangerous at the same time to do what he did around McKinley.
Yeah.
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 And Downhill, that song Downhill is just, it's a happy song. And the name and the music just kind of made me think of something nice about going downhill, because it's oh no.
Yeah.
It's just a very happy song.
Yeah. Well, my youngest son is a great skier. He's a ski racer and a great ski teacher, Jake. And this was after before Jake was born, but I was really thinking about skiing and the exhilaration and the idea of, there's a shaker in there that's used to keep this rhythm, and it's kind of that of skis, shushing that the skis make, as you go down. So, and then setting that up allowed me to put all kinds of little scenic things, like when you're going downhill, something will pass, you go through a grove of trees, or you'll pass other skiers and stuff, and all these little things could go by you. So just doing that, just a real simple, so that, I'm just realizing that now. I listened a lot to a band called Weather Report.
Oh, yeah.
And they would do a lot of things like that. They would set up this kind of funky beat where all kinds of stuff was moving through it. And I listened to them a lot, and I just realized, I hope I didn't steal that. It's kind of like Jaco Pastorius. It's kind of like a line.
Mm-hmm. Well, I interviewed also Alex deGrassi and other Windham musicians, Will Ackerman, Michael Manring, and a lot of them mentioned Weather Report, which is very interesting, probably because it was around the same time that you were creating music, and the important influence that Weather Report had,
Yeah.
you know, Jaco Pastorius and Wayne Porter, I think it was in
Wayne Shorter.
Wayne Shorter.
Very,
Yeah.
very influential band, and especially
Yes.
for bass players, for Michael Mannering, to have Jaco come ahead of him. Of course, Michael has taken that in other directions. God, we just did a record for Will that Michael played on it. He just did this beautiful stuff on there. I'm so happy to see everybody, you know, being creative into their 70s. It's really cool.
Yeah,
to
it
see.
is. I
Yeah.
think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Gosh, you made me a little emotional with that because
Mm.
I think I remember I think I told you I saw you when I was studying at the Occupational Institute in Berkeley. I went to a mall in San Francisco. I think
Oh.
it was you playing there. I remember
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
playing in a mall, and it's like. But those days, I felt, you know, I could not just approach anybody.
Oh,
I was doing my radio show by then, but I was on a break because I was studying in Berkeley.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, it's just listening and enjoying. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
the reason why I went to the mall, because it was like, this is amazing. I could see you there.
So the reason I was there, I had 3 different booking agents that year. And I had one booking agent who booked malls.
Oh.
So I would play, you know, I played 10 or 11 malls that year or something. And then I would play concert halls, and yeah, it was pretty great. And then some clubs. It was all, everybody had a different range of venues that they booked.
Gosh,
Well, shoot, it would have been nice to talk to you then.
Oh
you know?
gosh, I cannot imagine that. But it was, I had started my radio show in the 80s, in 1987, 88, and then I went for a study break in the early 90s into California, and then I went back and continued with my show. But, you know, those days it was kind of, it was living la vida loca.
Yeah,
It's
right.
different, so different. But anyways, I'm glad I'm able to do this now with you.
Oh, me too.
I'm
Yeah.
really surprised that you remember the music from last century so vividly and so clearly in your mind. It's like, it's amazing. You can play it as if it was yesterday that you created. It's amazing that you remember. Not everybody plays their old songs or remembers even their music from last century. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not like, I don't think I played that for a really long time.
oh, but you remember.
Why I would
this.
be able to remember it.
Because it's in your cell memory.
Yeah, I guess so. I did have a really one, you know, Margaret Saunders Ott was my piano teacher. She gave me a lot of tricks to remembering things and to keeping them up. But yeah, that's a piece. I mean, I think I've done that with orchestra a couple of times, but not recently, that's for sure.
Yeah, with the Boston Pops.
Pops, we did Westbound,
Uh-huh.
and we did Nevertheless Hello.
Oh, wow, great.
Yeah.
Well, let's go and listen now to the music for this project of The Shape of the Land, which is amazing music. And so I'm not sure, but you make me feel like you produced this album as well? You produced The Shape of the Land?
No, Elliot Mazer, well, wait a minute, let me think about this. Elliot Mazer, who was a good friend of mine and produced a lot of records in the San Francisco Bay Area, started working with Windham Hill artists, and he produced Neil Young, for example, and a bunch of different people.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, but great. This is an amazing album anyway, an amazing story. So let's go for a break, and then we'll be back. I'll tell you. It's a surprise. I'll
Great.
tell you what about.
Great.
Oh, God, you made me cry.
Oh,
No, it's like, this
Oh,
is so
sweet.
special to me. Oh, God.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, those pieces were they were very emotional. It was, one of the things that was really neat about the music I wrote for that is that I have 2 sons who are professional musicians, and one of them asked me to, you know, I hadn't written out the whole thing of Come Back, which was when he was by the bedside of Kimiko, his wife Kimiko, in the hospital. And the scene was, I called the piece Come Back. and the scene was he was asking her, he didn't want her to die. And yeah, one of my sons asked me to write that out for piano and give it to him. And then he actually did a piece with it.
Wow.
Which was pretty great. Yeah.
Amazing, gosh.
Meant a lot to me.
Well,
Yeah.
music, music is the expression of the soul, I believe. It's like just comes through in ways that we cannot even imagine, and brings so much from the inner soul. That's amazing.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como GoyPazR, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad ES. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Respira profundo y fluye con New Age.
Okay, so we're back, and now in 1987, you produced Metamara's album Morning Walk. Now that one you did produce, but you also played in it, in some of the songs that we're going to listen today. How was the experience of producing an album and playing with other artists? Like you did in The Shape of the Land and now in Metamara. How would you compare your experience of playing with other musicians versus your solo pianos?
Oh yeah. Well, I've done a lot of that, and I played a lot of. I probably played on over 200 records. We called them back in the day. I should count them sometime. But I played with a lot of different musicians pretty much all the time. So that's one of my favorite things to do. Of course, I love doing solo stuff too. But I love playing with musicians. There's something that's set up that's vastly different from doing your own music. There's energy and there's rhythm and there's exchange of ideas and exchange of emotions and things that happen like this that you just surprise you that you are actually on the same wavelength with those people. And it's a beautiful thing to play with different musicians. Metamora, the three members of Metamora are all super talented people and have solo careers of their own, and they were kind of an Indiana supergroup in a lot of ways. Indiana, Vermont, and brought a lot of folk tradition, Norwegian, English, Irish, Celtic. Everything was coming in there. Plus, they were really all great composers. So, in that case, producers have different functions. I wasn't going to tell them, I wasn't going to change their music at all because they knew what they were doing with their music and it was all right and it was all beautiful. I think a lot of the times, because there's three strong egos and three powerful musicians, a lot of the time it was keeping it moving without bogging down. The people talk about string quartets being like the worst possible kind of marriage you can have because they're just fighting all the time about little things, this and that and the other thing. Not that Metamora was fighting a lot, but there were definitely disagreements as to how this should be done and which piece should be done. And, they had more music than they needed, definitely.
That's why maybe they had only one album, I guess.
No, they have several.
Several.
I think, not on Windham Hill, but on, I'm trying to think. Can't remember the name of the label. It was on Green Leonard or something like that. Okay. And no, they had a bunch of records. They had records before their Windham Hill record and records after that one. Yeah. And I really liked that record. And I think I was trying to give them a different sound than what they had done before. Their sound was pretty, I would say, unprocessed in terms of reverbs and stuff like that, so that there wasn't the ambiance, rather than like putting it in a big room or, having a big cave sound, was more straight. Yeah. Like, here's the instrument, there's no reverb, there's nothing, it's just kind of straight. And I was trying to give them a more ethereal sound. Whereas I think their albums before were very earthy and very in your face kind of. Not that the music was aggressive, but that the sound was kind of aggressive. It was kind of right there. And that's more tradition, folk tradition. I was trying to, I think, set it in what I consider to be a little more magical place, and not so much an earthy, folk club kind of deal. I wanted this to be a little bit bigger sound, and I think as a producer, that's what I did. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. And then the things that I did were small. I mean, they were just little synthesizer touches and stuff.
Well, we're actually going to listen to the 3 songs that you participated either with the piano or the synthesizer, which are Through the Woods, Morning Walk, and Rhubarb. But before we go to the music, I want to give you a message that I told you about a Facebook group of Windham Hill, and I asked them if they wanted to have any questions or messages for you. And this is Eric Maguire. I don't know if you remember, but he says this. He's a wonderful person, and one of the best musicians I have ever worked with. Brilliant in every way. So that's his message.
Sweet. Thanks, Eric. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is a beautiful message. So let's listen to these 3 songs from Metamora, and then we'll be back to talk about Out of Frame from the 1988 launch that you did. Okay.
Great.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Abre las puertas de tu mundo interior y permanece con New Age.
Okay, Phil, how do you feel about the synthesizer versus the piano? I mean, what's your experience with both?
Yeah, I just finished a project that was all synthesizer, and it was not only all synthesizer, but it was all analog synthesizer as opposed to digital. Because I had gone back to first polyphonic synthesizer I owned was a Prophet 5 made by Sequential Circuits, and I was one of the first people who had that, and I was on their little poster and everything. And so they redid that for a couple of years ago, and I got one of those and did this project called, was for a sculpture, an outdoor sculpture project called Blackfoot Pathways Sculpture in the Wild. And it's 27 acres or something of these giant outdoor sculptures. And I did 24 pieces. There are 24 different sculptures. So I did 24 pieces, and they're all synthesizer. And that's my latest project. I'm going to release that, I think, before the end of the year. So I've done a lot of synthesizer stuff. And I think I initially went to solo piano. I was always what you call a multi-keyboardist. I played a lot of different kinds of keyboards. I went to the solo piano because at one point there was an arms race, I think, with keyboards. They just kept making more and more, and I would go into the studio. It used to be that I could go into the studio and they'd say, well, what do you want for this session? I'd say, okay, well, I want a piano, I want a Fender Rhodes, I want a clavinet, I want a Hammond B3, and I might want a Mini Moog, and these were things they'd bring in. So then there started to be studio musicians who would buy every new keyboard that was ever produced, and they had vans where they would haul these around, and I just thought, all right, I'm just going to become a piano player because there's no way I can compete with that, and I don't really like the idea of it anyway. So I really focused on solo piano for a long time, but this project was one that just, I really, the sculptures are so different. Each one is so different. They're from sculptors who are from all over the world, and they're all just really kind of amazing in their own right. Some of them are very obvious, I guess. Some of them are really abstract. All of them are really inventive. And I wanted to have sounds that did not, people could not relate to something else. I wanted them to really focus on what the piece was as they listened to the music. So for me, the synthesizer was the thing for that, because you can hear sounds on it and you can say, well, they're electronic, but I have no idea what that thing is. which I really like about the synthesizers, you know.
Amazing. Yeah, well, James Smiley from the same Facebook, Windham Hill Facebook group, wanted to know about your new projects, and you just let us know that there's something on the move with
Yeah,
this one. That's great.
that'll be out soon. Yep.
Great. So we are now, well, did I get lost? No, here. We are now in 1988 that you launched Out of the Frame, still with the Windham Hill. What can you share with us about this album? Maybe about the collaborations with Kenneth Nash, that I remember him from Music West. He was recording Music West. And any song stories about Walking Through the Walls, Swoop, and Full Chord Pickup. That's the ones I chose.
Yeah. Let's see. So Kenneth played. What all did he play on? I'm trying to remember. But he was kind of like the percussionist of the region. There were a lot at that point. There was more studio stuff going on. I think it's coming back somewhat because one of my son Michael, is playing a lot in the studios in the Bay Area. But Kenneth did a lot of percussion, a lot of drums, and worked with everybody. I know he worked with Andy Norell quite a bit, and a bunch of different people. And I had, let's see, I'm trying to think which one it was. He played on a couple of pieces.
Yeah, I think he was in one of the ones I mentioned, Walking Through Walls, Swoop, or.
So that Walking Through Walls, that was the drummer. That was a different drummer. Yep.
Yeah, and Michael Hedges was
Swoop.
also.
He played on Swoop. Definitely, he played on some other stuff.
And you also had Mike Marshall and Daryl Anger in this album, Out of Frame.
Yeah.
They were there too. So a lot of musicians collaborated with this album. It's also nice, a great album.
Well, I had been touring, with most of these folks, and so we got to know each other on the road, and we would play, during sound checks and stuff, get together and play, and so I wanted to make a little different record this time and make it not all solo piano, have some ensemble stuff in it, and that's why I wound up using those folks, using some different Windham Hill folks and some other people that I knew. Out of the Frame. It was emotionally. It was a very emotional time for me. I was going through a breakup, and while there's a lot of happiness in it, there's a lot of intense stuff. In fact, I was doing therapy at the time, and I came in and I told my therapist I was working on a record, and he said, "What's the name?" And I said, "It's called Out of the Frame." He says, "Brilliant." And I said, "Why is that brilliant?" He said, "Well, that's what therapists say when you're so messed up, you're out of the frame." And I said, "Oh, okay." And one of the reasons too was I think it was I'm not really sure where I got this story. It was a short story that someone had written about a beautiful woman that comes out of a frame into reality. But then the picture on the cover was kind of a spooky picture too.
Yeah, and Anne had to do anything with that cover, Anne Robinson, Out of the Frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I really like that record a lot. And of course, Michael played on Walking Through Walls. Michael Hedges did, and he's only played on a couple of people's records. I think he played on David Crosby record and my record. And I don't know if he's ever played on anybody else's, but
I think he's played with Michael Manring.
Oh, sure.
Or Michael played with the music of Michael Hedges.
Yeah. But that was nice to get Michael to play on one of my tunes. It was. And then we did a bunch of touring together, and of course, the band Montreux, tried to get everybody in on that. I think Daryl, for some reason, Daryl didn't make the cut. I don't know what it was. We made records together, a lot of records together after that, but yeah. For some,
oh,
yeah,
that's nice.
yeah.
So we're going to listen to these songs that I mentioned from Out of the Frame. And then I have another question from another fan from the Windham Hill Facebook page.
Sure.
And we'll see what you have to say about it. Let's go.
Great.
Let's listen to this and we'll be back.
Permasalud Glamping Lodge te espera en la provincia de Imbabura, en Ecuador, para que te conectes con la naturaleza, recuperes energía y bienestar. Te ofrecemos domos full equipados y carpas de glamping con toda comodidad. Escoge entre paquetes básicos de estadía y paquetes completos que incluyen desayuno y acceso al área de nuestra piscina natural con baño turco e hidromasaje. ¿Necesitas un espacio de paz y tranquilidad? Entonces, este es el lugar preciso. Visita nuestra web permasalud.com o envíanos un mensaje de WhatsApp al 0999-203-203.
Este es el espacio de New Age.
Okay, so Christopher says that you had great duets with Will Ackerman, with pieces like Floyd's Ghost and Silver Gates. And he says, when soloing over something like that, how is it that done? How much time do you have to spend with the music before laying something down, or is it rehearsed, or is it improvised?
Yeah. So both of those, things are done a little differently now. Like I just did a couple of pieces with artists that Will is producing, and I have my studio here, and I have, a couple of pianos and keyboards, and all my stuff is set up here. So he will send me, say, maybe just a couple of tracks of something. Like in the last case, he sent me 2 tracks of guitar and 2 tracks of Michael Mannering's bass, and then I'll add something over that. So I have a chance to listen to the music and try different things out. Those 2 pieces that you talk about were recorded in Will's studio, as I remember, in Vermont. So I was just there, and I can't even remember whether he called me in to do a special or if I just happened to be up there fishing or something. And he said, well, here's a piece I got, and it would have generally already been recorded. His guitar part would have been recorded, because a lot of times what Will will do is play the whole piece, but then he will take sections of different parts that he played and they'll put them together. Generally, he plays the whole piece start to finish. And then he'll have that. He'll know what the sound that he wants, and then he's got a piano, a little Steinway piano up there, and his engineer has a particular way of miking that's different from me. That's I have a sound that I like. That's not the same as their sound, but I like what the sound that they get, and I'll hear the piece probably once, and then I'll go out and try different things with it. I think Floyd's Ghost, trying to remember how fast that one came pretty fast. That was like 2 takes or something. I would play something. And when Will has a piece that he wants me to play on, he's always left something open in there. He knows what he wants. He wants piano in this thing. He wants me to do what I did. Floyd's Ghost, I think, because it was kind of a Western sounding thing, and we did Floyd Kramer. I think I did this before he would, it's sort of like bending notes on the piano. You can't really bend a note on the piano, but you can make it sound. And I think for some reason, that piece there was some really high, some stuff going on like that. And I think Will said, what should we call this? I said, how about Floyd's Ghost? And that's how that came about. Silver Gate, of course, is a beautiful place in Montana. I think it's in Montana. I'm not sure that it's across the Wyoming line or not, but it's really close to
Like Yellowstone.
Yellowstone.
Yeah,
Yellowstone. Close to. It might be right in the park, in which case it'd probably be in Wyoming. Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
amazing. Yep. I'm gonna see if I can find these songs to put it in this segment. But
Yeah, I like them. They're both nice songs. Yeah.
great. So then 1989 brought us Upright, that had
Yeah.
a very clear blues influence, blues
Yeah.
touch in it. So is blues your favorite genre to play? And is that what?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I just just before you called, I just did an interview for Elvin Bishop's biography that's coming out. I played with Elvin.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did 6 or 7 records with Elvin. Oh, I love the blues. The great thing about the blues is I think it's kind of like the game hacky sack. If you've ever played that, or you know people who play that.
Yeah.
You kick the ball. If you can play hacky sack, you can go all over the world and play with. You can go on a corner and you can find 5 people you can play with. And I think the blues is almost the same thing. There's styles of blues, almost blues sounding stuff in Africa. Ry Cooder, great guitarist, did one of those records with a great chorale player. Very bluesy sounding. And I did a record too that has a lot of blues stuff in it. I think that's one reason I love the blues. And there was a great television show in Germany that took all the great American blues players would tour Europe, and they'd all play this blues show. And I think all the programs are on YouTube. You can find them. And the interesting thing to me is it's such a simple form. You know, generally 3 or 4 chords. A lot of times it's the same rhythm, but you can tell those players. Like Elvin Bishop, you can play one note and you can tell it's Elvin, and that's kind of miraculous. Play one note, you know who it is. But you can, and you know all the players too. They say, "Oh, I'm getting tired of the shuffles." No, it's every single player who came out there expressed themselves through that simple medium, and just in a very beautiful way. It's not. People think, "Oh, it's easy music to play." No.
No, it's not easy. Amazing.
Yeah, any music's easy to play if you don't do it right. You know.
Yeah. Well, what songs? I mean, there's a song that has a strange title that I guess it's not what I thought. It's like not what I thought.
Yeah, different spelling for not what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. That was. That's a Bo Diddley beat, and Vinnie Colaiuta played drums on that. So the bass player couldn't make it that day. So it was just, I said, well, I'll put bass on later. So just Vinnie and I played that piece.
Whoa.
And he was so great, and I just, played a lot of bass on that. So I just thought, no, I will just leave it that way. I don't know, not what I thought. I was probably going through another breakup.
Oh. But it spelled so funny, so I thought you were referring to somebody, some foreigner that couldn't really spell it. Not what I thought. It's not.
I shouldn't say what it's about. I should let people just
let him think.
Go ahead. Whatever you think it is that's what it is. Yeah.
How about the Frogman or Upright? And as we didn't know, as if we
didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, Frogman first. Yeah, there's a singer out of New Orleans, Clarence Frogman Henry, and I was in New Orleans once, and there was I was so thrilled because Clarence Frogman Henry had a song that was kind of a big, I don't know how big the hit was, but it was a well-known song, I'm a lonely boy, I ain't got a home, I can sing like a bird, I can sing like a frog. So he had this riff they do. That was the riff. That was the riff for the thing. He would sing that, and so he got the nickname of Clarence Frogman Henry. So Well, there's two reasons I call it Frogman. One reason was that I kind of twisted that to, that was, so I took, but I made a little bit longer thing. So another interesting little thing about this was that I wrote part of this when I was playing with Elvin. And so that would have been 14 years before that. And I just remembered that. And I think part of it was, and this was also there. So I just took that and made a longer piece out of it. And Frogman, the other, I could tell this, it's fine to tell this. The other part of Frogman was I had this very vivid dream. There was a point in my life when I was writing down all my dreams. And this was one that because when you write them down, you remember them better. And if you start doing that, you just can learn a lot from your dreams. So I had this dream, great dream, that I was climbing a mountain. And there was a big cave there. And I started to go in the cave, and I felt that there was something else in the cave. And there was a figure in the back of the cave, a hooded figure, a little short-hooded, really short-hooded figure.
Hobbit.
Pretty close. More like Yoda, kind of. And so he kind of came out of the darkness, and there was a frog wearing a hoodie. And I looked at him. Neither one of us said anything. Finally, he said, "Oh, what do you want?" And I said, "Well, I want to fly to that mountain over there." And he said, "Well, what's stopping you?" So then I flew to the mountain. So that was Frogman. And, for me, that's always, you're always at this point of decision when you either have to jump or go back into the shadows. And I've jumped a lot. So that was just another dream, encouragement kind of dream, which I always liked. And then it turns out, so I started looking up this idea of the frog, and it turns out that the frog is, especially the flying frog, is a very sacred symbol to a lot of different cultures. And it's interesting how that stuff pops up. So it's New Orleans, Clarence Frogman Henry, the flying frog.
How interesting. How interesting. Well, let's listen then to this music. We'll have Upright, As If We Didn't Know, Not What I Thought, and Frogman from this album. And then we'll go to the last album you recorded for the Windham Hill, which was Cinema. Okay, so let's listen to the music and we'll be back.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como Ngoypas R, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad S. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Estás escuchando New Age, el programa de la nueva era.
Cinema was your last 20th century album, but the last one for the Windham Hill as well, in general terms, because then you played something from Adagio. So you chose several film scores to play. What do you recall about this project? I mean, we are going to listen to some Cinema Paradiso, Madame Sothen, Conversations at the Solar Fountain, and the Kinderszenen Opus from, I remember, what was it, from Robert Schumann?
Yeah. Yep.
So how did this project come about, and did you know it was going to be your last project with the Windham Hill? What was going on? what was happening?
No, I actually did not know that was going to be my last project with Windham Hill. This was when I think I might have had an idea. I knew that I didn't really want to give them any more compositions because there were, I had written a bunch of stuff that they didn't, I played for them, and Will Ackerman said, "Oh, I think those are some of the best things you've written." And he was not the head of Windham Hill at the time, and the head of Windham Hill at the time did not want to give me the budget that I asked for because I wanted to do a bigger record. I didn't want to do just a solo piano record. So I think that was in the works, and I decided that I would do an album of movie music because I love film composers. They influenced me so much, and there's so much great film music. I mean, it's just remarkable. It's a whole other world, and it's a world that encompasses all genres. I mean, every film composer writes in so many different styles, and I mean, especially contemporary film composers. And you know, there are kind of the classic guys who had a style, and you knew what they were going to sound like. But then there were other people who were all over the place. So part of the great fun about that record was watching a lot of movies and deciding, you know, what themes I would use. And people would tell me, "Oh, I really love this movie," and it'd be a movie I hadn't listened to. Some of them I already knew, and I knew I was going to use. I could do 10 records like that, 10 piano records like that easily. It's just the world is of film music is so wonderful and so great, and the composers are so terrific, you know. But that was really so much fun because I would just sit and watch the movies, and then I would note. And this was back. I mean, you couldn't just go get a chunk from YouTube. This was where you had to have a VCR. I don't think there were even DVDs at that point. And you play the tape, and then you stop it, and you note what point it was. You'd have to start it at 0, and then you go to this. You say, "Well, here's a great tune that nobody has recorded and nobody knows. You know, let me do this one." You know, some of them are very famous, and Cinema Paradiso. The theme is just
Ennio Morricone.
yeah,
Amazing.
it's so beautiful.
It is.
You know, and then but I'm So Staying is Cajun folk song. Wanted to do that, and then Aaron Copland wrote some film music, and he was a big influence on me. So I wanted to do a piece of his. Let's see, what else did you say? What other
We have.
song are we doing? Oh, that's Robert Schumann.
Yeah.
Yes, which is
Classic.
yeah, and that was in an Australian movie called My Brilliant Career. And I had played that, I think it was a string quartet, a piano quartet with 3 strings. And so I had played that when I was a teenager, and I remembered that. And I always wanted to just play that as a solo piece rather than letting the cello have the beautiful melody. I thought I could do it. So that's where that came from. I also loved the film. The film was great. I had to like the films, first of all, and then I had to like the music.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
of course. Okay, so we're going to listen to these songs, but this is the last part for today's show, the first part for your 20th century music. And before we go to the music, and to wrap up this first part of the interview, is there any great memory or experience in your journey until this moment that you would like to share, that you sort of recall?
Well, those years were so amazing. So many different terrific experiences. And I think the thing that, I think a fly is chasing me. I think the thing that I really want to express is how grateful I was to everybody. And to Windham Hill, and to Will Ackerman and all the people who worked at Windham Hill. I made terrific friends. I still have. I'm married to one of them. And it was just a great time. It was a great time for me. The whole thing, you know, getting to, I had already done a lot of performing in great venues and traveled around the world and stuff, but to be able to take this music from Montana and take it around the world was a big opportunity, and it was something that I'll always appreciate and remember with love.
Oh, that's great. Well, I wanna thank you so much for doing this show about your 20th century music. We're gonna go ahead and listen to this music from Cinema, and then we are going to have another show for sure for the music of your 21st century. So thank you so much, Phil, and I'll see you for the next show.
Thank you so much for being so great. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's listen to music, and we'll be back for the next program.
Con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, Permasalud Glamping, Marathon Sports.